You're listening to Mark of the Maker. Hey everybody, I'm Mark Steiner and you're listening to Mark of the Maker. This is episode 102 of the show, and we're rejoined by our most recent guest, but we'll get to that in just a minute. We got lots to talk about. I think we got our whole crew here today. We have Mr. Sean Kendrick.
Hey, hey.
We have Michael Birch.
Here, here.
Oh, and Tom Crine.
Hey, everyone.
Nice. All right. So our usual folks are here. Sean has a message for our patrons.
We're going to start it out with a big thank you to all the folks who go over to Patreon and give us a little bit of money every month. You guys are the ones who keep the mics moving to our guests. You help keep the lights on and help us do this crazy thing that we've been doing for 102 episodes now. We really appreciate it. Thank you so much. And if any of you folks listening feel like heading over to patreon.com and maybe getting in on helping us do this thing, we'd really appreciate it. And if not, well, that's cool too. The show will remain free for the time being. And thank you guys.
Yeah, we appreciate it greatly.
Appreciate y'all.
Michael, you want to hit our next one?
Oh, yeah. The tried and true AMXINC.com, George American Metal Exchange. He's got all your titanium, zirconium, some Damasteel, Mokatite, all that fun stuff, the weird stuff, meteorite. I've got to go here soon and get some thick stuff for backspacers and clips. He's been with us for a while, and we appreciate it. And, support the guys that support us, because it means a lot. You can hit him up at amxinc.com.
George is a true champ and a friend of the show without question. He's been supporting us for a long time, so thanks a bunch, George.
Yeah, man.
Thank you, bud. True believer.
That's right.
We also need to say thank you to our friends at Giant Mouse Knives, Jim and Jesper and Jens over there, making some very cool stuff. Lots of interesting projects. They always have something, cooking. I'll leave that to their entrepreneurial spirit and seemingly unstoppable design ethics. So thanks much to the Giant Mouse guys for your support. Be sure to go check out their stuff, and you can find them on Facebook, Instagram, and at their website. I think it's giantmouse.com. Does that sound right, Tom? Am I getting that right?
That's it.
Thanks to those guys for your help. We appreciate you.
So this is a shout out to Billy and Nick's show, the Pacific Northwest Custom Invitational. It's coming up Saturday, July 29th. When this comes out, it'll probably be about a week away. Sadly, I'm not going to be able to make it. You guys should go.
Wow.
Right? You guys should go and have fun. I'll have some FOMO going on, and it sounds awesome. Like the people that are going to be there, it sounds pretty awesome. They've done a good job in the past, and I think this one's going to even be better.
Yeah, killer lineup.
Almost cruel having you read that ad there.
Yeah.
It's going to be an awesome show.
That's rubbing it in.
Yeah.
It's all right. I wish I could go.
We appreciate those guys.
Yeah, it just doesn't work this year again.
Yeah.
But Nick and Billy have done a lot of work, and they've got some pretty awesome prizes and door prizes and just all sorts of stuff. Michael Walker's going to be there. Did I mention that?
You did not, but that's big.
It's on the ocean, and it's badass.
Tom's talking himself into a deep hole of disappointment that he's not going.
Like,
oh yeah, I love that part of the country too. I just haven't been in years.
All right, thanks fellas for your support. Definitely check out the Pacific Northwest Custom Invitational. All right, and so that we're rejoined. You know, last time we said we were going to ask Todd Begg to come back and chat with us, so I think Todd's here again with us. Hey Todd, thanks for joining.
I am back.
Awesome.
All right.
Thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate it.
It's a very exclusive club, Todd, the people that have done in the show twice in a row.
Yeah. Well, you guys do it all the time, right?
Well, we do, but usually it's just the extra chatty Cathys that get two shows in a row.
It's I couldn't shut this guy up. We got to do another episode.
People with
That's a good problem to have. Yeah. lots of history, lots of stories, lots of good stuff. So yeah, so last time we talked about Todd's timeline and about the guild and a bunch of other stuff, kind of a lot of tangents along the way. We do a lot of that on Mark of the Maker, which is cool. So we're going to sort of keep going from here. Michael, you want to kind of head us off in a direction?
Well, we hit a lot about, actually we wandered all over the place, but we kind of want to drill back down into what you create and how you got to where you are and what you're doing now. Mm-hmm. And one of the important ones to me is always design. I'm always intrigued in how other makers get around designing stuff. Is it the machines that help you get to where you are, or did you do it because of a certain thing? And you have a very unique look with your knives. And we're curious, how do you go about creating that design aesthetic?
So there's different ways to approach, your design aesthetic, essentially. And for most guys, what it's going to be, you're just going to, you're going to grow up looking at knives. You're going to see certain aspects of different knives that you really like. You like a thumb ramp, or you like this jimping, or you like the file work, or you hate file work, or, it's like you're going to see all these different things. And kind of like, remember that chef analogy thing I was saying about the ingredients?
Yep.
And it's kind of like that. So you're looking at this whole table full of ingredients, and it's like, how are you going to put that together in a special dish that's your signature dish, that is your style? And that's kind of what makers do over time. Everybody, I think, goes through a kind of a period of just investigating everything, and they want to try everything, and they want to try this, I want to try that, I want to make this, I want to make that. And then if you're going to, but in my opinion, if you're going to try to do this professionally, you have to kind of mature into a design, series that is yours, and it's recognizable as your design work, and and there has to be a body of work there, and we had talked about when someone sees your knife on the table without even looking at the logo, you want somebody to go, that's a Tom Crine, or that's a Todd Begg, or that's a, you can tell right away who it is at a glance without even looking at the logo. So when you do that, I think you've been pretty successful as far as, maturing your design elements. I think that's really important. And another big part of that is what's super important to you. Some guys like art knives. Some guys are pushed. They want to do bushcraft only. Some guys want extreme hard use. Other people want extreme beauty. It's like, well, what are you pushing towards? What's your thing? Like you think of like Wolfgang Lochner. You think he gives two hoots about making a bushcraft knife? Never. Or at least if he did, he probably wouldn't take pictures of it. He would make it for somebody as a friend or something, but that's not his driving motivation. His driving motivation is that artistic thing that he does. So, you couple all those things together into and then you have to pursue the skill set. So the way I try to explain it to new guys, I'm like, okay, what do you want to be able to do in your knives? Well, I want to be able to do clip points. And I was like, okay, let's start there. Clip point. How do we do an actual clip point? And then I'll show them how I grind it, and I'll show them how other guys do it, and some guys file it, and this and that. And I said, so we're going to look at your skills that you have right now. We're going to look at your equipment that you have right now. And then we're going to try to develop a skill set based off of those things, coupled with your desire to be able to do this. And then once you do all this and you're successful at it, you don't really sell your practice work. You sell once you're, confident in it. And then now you own that. It's like a tool that you can keep for the rest of your life and put it in your toolbox, your knife making toolbox. And you can pull that out whenever you're designing a knife and say, yeah, I think I want a clip point here, and I know how to do it. You know what I mean? So that's the way I like to approach it, kind of methodically. It's like, okay, I like this, I like that. Do I know how to do this or that? Yes, no, maybe, practice until I'm confident I do know how to do that. And then when I sit down to design a knife, I'm sitting down with this tool chest of abilities that I'm designing around, and I try to make it work, as far as the whole flow and the design itself and then the functionality. But in the background is this tool chest always. It's like, it doesn't do you any good to design something that you can't make.
Right.
So that's kind of the way I approach it.
So how did you come about some of your signature design elements, like fullers with piercings in them? You like a kind of a split handle and quite a few things. These are things that I see and I'm like, that's a Todd Begg look. How did you approach that? How did you get there?
So the very first knife, I put the flute with the holes in it, that Pierce Fuller. I had made, and it was funny because we were talking about this knife on the previous episode. It was that push dagger that I'd won Best New Maker with, and back however many moons ago there in Oregon. And so when I made this thing, and I noticed in the center where all the inlays came together, I had a big, wide, blank, open space of D2, and I was like, I need to do something there. I need to put something there to make it look cool. Take some weight out. It just looks unfinished. And so I went in there with a side radius cutter on my Bridgeport, and I cut a deep flute because I always liked the way the flutes looked like on Smith & Wesson revolvers. Mm-hmm. And so I cut a flute on each side like that. I was like, that looks cool. I was like, I'm going to put some holes in it. It'll look like a mag wheel kind of, So I put some holes on it, and it was like my large, small, and I was like, that's cool. I really like that. And I got a lot of positive, people really liked that at the show. So I was like, I'm going to keep doing that. I'm going to see what else I can put that on. And then, so I had incorporated more and more of my machining abilities. I was like, I really like that Pierce Fuller. It's like, and I have the ability to do it. I know how to do it because I'm a machinist. So yeah, okay, I'm going to design around that. Well, then, over the years, you get kind of known for certain things. And I don't put the Pierce flute on every knife I make. And then, if anything, I try to add some machined elements and try to make that more my signature thing. And, where it's like, I don't want to make a knife where the average guy in his garage could make the same thing without, some serious know-how and machinery. Just in an attempt to stand out.
Well, like Michael said, and we've talked about that same thing on this show, that's sort of a measure of success in finding your groove when it comes to design, right? Is when you hit that spot where they're immediately recognizable, right? As your work as a maker, right? And that's very cool. I mean, I think there are lots of makers who strive to get there and continue to try to work to reach that spot. And then maybe a different tier of maker that, everybody just knows when you see it. Yep, I know who made that knife, right?
Right. I don't think it's just something that's kind of cool that can happen. It is cool when it starts to happen, but I think it's vital. It's absolutely vital if you're trying to do this, for a living. And you're trying to take it as far as you can. I mean, a dude could just make knives in his garage his whole life and not care about any of that stuff. But if you do care and you're trying to make a mark and you're trying to be well known and you're trying to make a living, then doing that and reaching that level of recognition like that, it's important. It's extremely vital to do that, in my opinion.
I remember some of the days of like the work in progress, the custom knife and gun challenges that we did. I mean, you made your Bridgeport like bend in ways I didn't know it could bend. And I mean, did some of the stuff you do, did that come from you just trying new things on that machine, bringing that machine knowledge in and being like, I'm going to see if I can do this. And then it became like, all right, yeah, this is an element that I really enjoy.
Yeah, it's a little bit of both. It's like everything when I was a machinist, when I worked in the oil field and the aerospace, I did way more complicated stuff on the Bridgeport than I ever do in knife making. And so, I knew that I had the ability and the confidence to set it up to do crazy things with it. And so when I had an idea on the mill, I was like, okay, do I want to do that? Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and set it up and do that. And I'll cut this weird little deal, this and that, or the work holding and, how I hold it, the fixturing, the tooling and all that. It's funny you mentioned that. When I first moved to Texas, I was working on Jerry Moen's Bridgeport. I was doing a bunch of knives with saw teeth on them. So I had the head at an angle and I extended it out and I turned the vise, indicated in at an angle. And he was watching me. He didn't know that his Bridgeport would do all that stuff. And he was just he got a chair and he was just sitting there watching me work. And then our friend of ours came in the shop, this older gentleman. He's like, what are you doing? He goes, I'm watching Todd make that mill turn around and kiss his ass. He goes, I didn't even know that thing would do that. It was kind of funny. I'd never heard that one before, but yeah, there's a lot of stuff that a Bridgeport mill will do that the average guy just doesn't know, unless you've been a machinist.
Yeah. Like me, I've said many times, I'm a knife maker with machines. I'm not a machinist by any stretch of the imagination.
Right.
And my biggest worry is getting that Bridgeport back to where it was. It's not moving it around, it's getting it back.
And that's why I see guys with multiple fixtures set up on their table. And to me, it just screams, I'm scared of moving anything, because it's like, okay, it's set up. And that's one of the things I do when I teach. I taught at Johnny Stout's, one of his hammer ends at one time, and it was basically just mill setup. And the first thing we did, and I think it freaked him out, as I walked in to his shop during the class, I unbolted his vise, set it on the floor, and I took the head and I cranked it off to the side, and I lifted it up, and he was like, how will we ever get that back? Well, I have my indicators with, and we stoned the table down, stoned the bottom of the vise, and started indicating everything in and tramming everything, and then dialed in the vise, and that all took, about 5-10 minutes, and it was all set up and ready to go. And I try to explain to people, I'm like, when I was a machinist and I was working on something in the vise, and then all of a sudden another job would come up, and it's like, hey, we need this and this. And then that's what we call a table setup, where you're not actually even using a vise. You just take it off, you put it on a cart, you stone the table down, you clean it up, you do your setup, work on several parts, and then you go back to your vise or a rotary table or whatever. And it's like, you might set those things up 2 or 3 or 4 times in a day, and so you learn how to do it. And then with knowledge, you lose the fear, right?
Yeah.
And so it's like, I'm not afraid to do any of that kind of stuff, because I know exactly how to set it up back where it was. So, and the other thing is, especially on a mill, is you should periodically check it to make sure it's still trammed in. Matter of fact, you should do it before every job. In a machine shop, it's like, if your boss sees you walk up to a mill and just start working on it without checking the tram, you're going to have a talking to. He's like, well, what if that machine was set a half a degree off for a job, a half a degree, and then now we've got everything off? It's like, oh, well. So
right.
Anyway, yeah, that's I could go on and on about all that, but that's important, and that goes back to that toolbox thing, right? I was talking about. It's like, I really want to have some cool machined features in my knives. Well, then it's incumbent upon me to learn how to do this and that on the mill or the lathe or whatever it is, surface grinder, and then now you own that skill, and it's in your toolbox forever, and nobody can take it from you.
Seems like it's kind of a back and forth thing, right? Like you said, you need to design stuff that you can actually make. And then also, that's the stretch, right? Like, oh, I want to do something different or cool, or I saw something somewhere, right? Or I saw a shape, not in knives even necessarily. And I want to figure out how to incorporate that into my design. And then you got to go figure out how the hell do I actually do that, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and there's a lot of trial and error there, and there's a lot of things, and then the more comfortable you become, and the more knowledgeable you become on the mill, the more creative you can be, because you start to understand its capability. A perfect example what I'm talking about is, we would, in the machine shops, I remembered we did crazy setups that you're not going to find in any book. Like, there were times where we'd hold the part, in the spindle, and the cutter was down on the table, and then it was like held at a weird angle, and it was just all this crazy stuff that you couldn't do any other way. It just wouldn't work. And so you just have to be creative. And there's a saying in machine shops, and when they're talking about different types of machines, and the old guys say it, but it says, it all goes round, up and down, and in and out. It doesn't matter if it's a mill, a lathe, a jig bore, a radial arm drill. They all do the same thing. They all go round and round, up and down, and in and out. So you just you just get creative in that process of figuring out, well, how do I hold this? What machine can I use to make, this and that, and do what, I mean, I learned more in that first machine shop I worked in the oil field, and it was all manual machines, and people would come in with just crazy problems, and we would have to figure out how to fix it, or how to machine it, weld it back up and machine it back. And like a perfect example is Caterpillar came in with this huge bucket from some sort of front end loader, and it had I don't know how many pairs of bushings basically that this thing ran on, right? And it was like these big ears that bushings went into, and they all had to be machined exactly in the same plane. So I was like, how are we going to do that? It's like we're going to have to flip that thing around at least once to reach it from this side of the machine, then reach it from that side of the machine to bore all those holes and have them all what they call looking at each other, right? Where they're all lined up.
Right.
And this old man said, no, watch this. And so we started taking round rods, machining knuckles on the ends, drilling and broaching square holes with a set screw to hold lathe tools. Then he started welding pillow blocks, bearings all over this thing. And then we ran this rod through every one of these with a lathe tool, and then it cut all of them at the same time.
Oh, wow.
Just turned it on, and it's like this big Frankenstein knuckle thing going clack, 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 and it's moving along this thing. And it was hooked over in the tailstock. Table moved back and forth, and it cut like 16 of these things all in one setup at one time. And they were all on the same plane. And I was like, I would have never thought of that. I would have, just crazy. They had to do a really precise hole in the side of a frame of a truck one time, and everybody had tried the magnetic drill presses and all those different things. And we were just out of options. And so they brought it to us. They're like, well, you guys figure it out. So they brought it in, and we talked about it, and we hooked this truck up to the cranes and then lifted it up with a forklift, flipped it down on its side where it was almost touching the floor. And we had an 18-foot tall radial arm drill press. And it was a Fosdick. And it had a 4-inch drill bit. And I swung that out as far as it would go. And I drilled the hole right in the side of the frame of that truck. Right. And then there was like a bolt pattern I did right there, all while that thing's on its side, swung it back. And then we slowly tilted the truck back on its wheels, let it sit overnight, and then fired it up in the morning and drove it out. And we called them and said, your truck's done. They're like, how did you do that? We're like, well, if we told you, you wouldn't need us anymore.
Right.
But the point is I learned a lot of stuff, thinking like that about how are we going to approach this, and how are we going to do the impossible or seemingly impossible with the machines that we have. And it was really cool. It was a neat experience because every day you go in, it was something different, just crazy stuff. It was like, oh, wow. I would never thought to do it that way,
Yeah. I think it's an interesting thing where people think of stuff like being a machinist as this kind of a rote task kind of a thing, right? And okay, maybe the basic functionality is, but whether it's being a machinist or an engineer, or even like my daughter's a lawyer, right? It's like those are all about solving puzzles, right?
Mm-hmm.
Using a palette of tools to figure out how to solve puzzles. And I always find that fascinating because, like you said, I spent a bunch of time in machine shops as a young engineer just because I knew these guys knew how things actually worked, right? So I would go spend, part of the day or my lunchtime or whatever in the machine shop, just watching the ways that these guys approached problems. And it was always very, very educational to see thinking outside the box, certainly outside the engineering box on how stuff works. And then for me, it was really helpful because I could go back and when I needed to come up with the design, you know what I mean? At one, I knew a little more about how it actually would have to be made, right? Because there's always that frustration someone walks in with a print and the shop says, "Yep, nice try, son. Go away and make some. Give us something that we can actually make within reason, right?" Mm-hmm. And so that was a good piece of it. But even just the whole, hey, don't be afraid to, like you said, turn this thing on its side, upside down, whatever. Pull on some strings you haven't pulled on before, and maybe there's a solution there. So,
yep.
It seems like that's the case in knife making as well, right? So
it is, and so like I said, I was a knife maker before I was a machinist. So once I started learning all this stuff, my knives took a real leap in quality, and then they took a real leap in the designs. I was able to do things. With my designs where I was like, oh yeah, well, what if I do this? And maybe I want a slot right here. And, stuff that I was not doing before I was a machinist.
Right.
Doing like dovetailing bolsters, but doing, crazy angles. Like I remember one knife I did years ago was a full integral, and then I put 2 different handle materials, but I made a complete dovetail and slid them together, then inlaid that into the side of the handle. Just stuff like that you can't pull off seamlessly unless you know how to machine stuff. It's just the way it is.
Right.
Man, I was wondering, when you were really starting to, get into the knife thing and really starting to figure out what you wanted to do and trying to develop your own aesthetic, who were some of the makers who influenced you the most?
The makers that I just drooled over were Bud Cronk. Bud Cronk was one. I really like Randall's. Bob Lum was. I just really loved his. None of my knives looked like any of his, but I just really appreciated his design ability. Those were some of the early ones. Jack Crane, with the Predator knives and all that. That stuff just really impressed me all, to death when I was young. And Jimmy Lyle, he was another one that I was really impressed with, with the Rambo stuff and his other models. And then I was always just fascinated with like the stuff that Wolfgang Lochner did, the stuff Gil Hibben was doing with Paul Eller's, designs, and Paul Fox. I don't know if you guys know who that was. And, yeah, amazing stuff. I actually own one of his that Paul Eller's designed, and then Paul Fox made it. But just stuff like that, stuff that was just real. Of course, I always liked. I don't know. I'm a weird collector too, because I'll buy something that's just crazy over the top, Kronk style, and then I'll go and buy the latest K-bar.
Right.
It's all cool to me. And it's funny because when I get a knife, I can remember exactly the moment when I was young, when I saw it, and I was like, oh, I gotta get that. I gotta get that one day. And, to make like a promise to myself, and I do it. I if I run into one and I've got the money and I've got the opportunity, I'll get it. My wife's like, why are you buying that? And I'm like, well, there's a story behind it, and I'll tell you.
Right. Yeah, I think some people might be surprised by that, hearing that list of influences, right? Just because they're so different. But I think maybe like with any other collector or enthusiast or someone who just loves knives, it's probably parts of each of those, right? Mm-hmm. Whether it's some of the crazy shapes of Kronk or some of the wild stuff that Gil Hibben was making, all the way off to what I think of as kind of the other end of the scale, right? With that super clean elegance from Lum. And, I like that diversity. I have a lot of that same kind of diversity in my collection of stuff. And sometimes people look and kind of tilt their head a little bit, and it's like, hey man, there's lots of reasons to love knives, right?
Right.
That's right.
It doesn't always. Schneider, he was a big influence. Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. Do you have his Cobra knife?
The Cobra knife, yeah. And what was so cool was, I knew who he was back when I was a kid, right? Because I knew about the Cobra knife, and he had been at the Art Knife Invitational. He made really, really cool stuff with a lot of machining influence in it too. And I was at a show in Vegas one year, and this guy comes up to me. He's like, "Hey, Mr. Begg, it's nice to meet you. My name's so-and-so." And he goes, "There's an elderly man that lives down the road from me in Apple Valley, California," or I think it's Apple Valley, yeah. And he goes, and he's a retired knife maker, and he really likes your knives, and he'd like to meet you, and he wants to know if you would come to his house, if you're ever in the area, and he'd like to meet with you and spend the day with you. I was like, really? I said, well, what's his name? He goes, his name's Herman Schneider. And I pulled up my phone, and I had a Herman Schneider folder in my photos, and I was like, you mean this Herman Schneider? He's like, yeah, that's him.
That's the guy.
And I was like, you tell Mr. Schneider I'll be there as soon as this show's over.
Right.
And I went and spent the day with him, and it was about 4 months before he passed away, and I was so glad that I went and spent the day with him.
Oh, yeah.
It was so cool. Awesome. I mean, he was showing me all kinds of stuff. And what was really cool? He says, yeah, he goes, everybody gets their 15 minutes of fame or whatever. He goes, mine wasn't that Cobra knife. He goes, that was cool. That was a cool thing that happened. He goes, but my claim to fame was, he goes, I helped design and I machined and I installed the very first turbocharger. I was like, really? He goes, yeah. He goes, I helped design that whole concept. And he goes, we machined them and I made all the prototypes. He goes, and I installed the very first one that ever went on a car.
Wow.
And I was like, oh, that was kind of cool. He was telling me the whole story about that. He's like, yeah, then Corvair comes to us with that piece of crap and they wanted to put a turbocharger in that. It was,
right.
But
Careful now.
When he got the call from Sylvester Stallone to do that knife for Cobra, he thought it was a crank call and he almost hung up on him. He's like, yeah, this is Sylvester Stallone. I'm making a movie. I wanted to make a knife. He's like, yeah, right. And he goes to hang up. He's like, no, it's me. Anyway, yeah, really cool. He had a fantastic collection of stuff. He had all these paintings that were done by Buster Orensky.
Yeah.
That were done with pens, with ink pens. And
oh, wow.
Yeah, and he was actually an artist too. He had done cartoonist. He had done a whole bunch of cartoons for newspapers and military, what do you call them, comic books back in the 40s during World War II. He had drawn all these comics and he drew me a picture and I kept it. He said take it and I framed it and it was really cool stuff. But yeah, but it was funny because when we were out in the shop, we started talking. He goes, well, I do this, I do that. Then I go to this and I go to that. And then it was grit for grit, step by step, stone for stone. We had the exact same process. And I had never met the man.
Huh.
He goes, well, I start with 60, then I go to a 220 belt, and then I'll sometimes go to a 400. And he goes, and then I go to stones. And he had all the stones laid out. He goes, I'll start with a 400, then I'll do an 800, 1200, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, that's exactly how I do it too. And it's just really cool. Anyway,
that's awesome.
But yeah, and so to meet some of your design influence heroes like that is really, really cool. And my advice to any of the younger guys getting into this is if you get the opportunity to do that, take it. Take it, because had I kind of pushed that opportunity off, Mr. Herman Schneider would have passed away and I would have never met him.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Wow. Sometimes those opportunities come by surprise, right? When it comes to,
right,
stuff, just sometimes you happen across it, but sometimes you got to go make it happen. It's maybe a combo of both, right? Especially if you want to try to make something like that happen where you're living legends.
That's just sitting at a show, waiting to be talked to,
Yeah.
Like we said that over and over before.
Right. So many tables with fantastic makers that get often overlooked, right, by newer generation collectors. And these are like true legends sitting in the room, hanging out, reading a book or whatever, right? And it's like, man, go talk to some of those guys. There are some serious talents out there that people maybe just aren't aware of or not paying attention to or, never learned about.
Yep. Yeah. It's funny, the level of craftsmanship that, those generations put into their knives compared to what you see, in a lot of the newer stuff now. And what impresses a newer collector. They're not as impressed by that old world craftsmanship as, the younger or the older like my generation. It's like you would marvel at this guy's level of craftsmanship and you wanted to strive to get to that level and be like him, But now it's like you'll see a guy, and I'm not saying everybody in this new generation, but you'll see, somebody really rough bevels, everything's bead blasted, nothing's lined up, it's pretty crude, and they're like, and they get a big following on one of the social medias, and they're like, I made it, I'm amazing.
Right.
And you look at it and you're like, well, you're thinking to yourself, no, not really. It's got it looks like a prison shank to me.
Kind of hurt my feelings, Todd.
But you understand what I'm saying, right? It's like it's almost like once they get enough people patting them on the back, the striving stops.
Yeah.
And and that's sad to see. For me, I'd like to see that continue. And going back to like the guild, right? It's like most of the guys that join the guild, they're on that path where they're striving to get better and better and better, and I like to see that.
Yeah.
But you don't always see it anymore. And it's always been like that, I guess. There's been so many, they used to call them like shade tree knife makers, the guys that were just, instead of a handmade knife, they were homemade knives, you know what I mean? And they were just kind of crude, and they sold them at gun shows or whatever. And well, now those guys have an outlet, it's called Instagram. and and they don't really have to improve all that much. I'm not talking about all online knife makers either. I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm just saying there's a good chunk of them out there that really aren't interested in improving, and that's too bad from my perspective.
Oh, yeah. But some of it also is just what they like, too. You have to go back to, like, the Phil Hartsfields and the stuff that
Sure.
I'm sure that people were just like, what in the hell is this? And then
People had pity when they looked at his knives. They were like, oh, you're a nice guy, but you're gonna have to finish them better, and you're gonna have to use stainless. And people would like pull him to the side and like try to have a talking with him, like, dude, you're a nice guy, man. Let me show you. This is what you got to work on. He's like, this is how I want to make them. I was like, all right, cool.
yeah,
Right.
Worked out pretty well for him.
Yeah,
It did.
They didn't realize he
but
was-
see, that was his vision, though. That's what he wanted to do. And from that standpoint, I can respect it. Now, if he looked at other makers and it's like, I wish I could make knives like that, or I want to make knives like that, but he always just stayed right there, then I'd have far less respect for it.
Oh, yeah.
But you're right. I remember in one of his articles, he says he uses a 40 grit belt to do his grind. And then after heat treat, he uses a worn out 40 grit belt because it makes it kind of shiny. That was, he only used 40 grit belts and that was it. And when they wore out, that's how he made them kind of shiny after heat treat. I thought it was hilarious.
That's funny.
Made purchasing real easy. Didn't have to.
Yeah, just buy 40 grits. But like we talked about in the last episode, there's room for everybody. Just because I find something unappealing or a concept or a mindset or whatever, and it doesn't mean it's I'm right. It just means, well, for me, I don't look at it that way.
Right.
Well, let's be honest. We're crotchety old men. There's stuff out there that's not for us. And that's fantastic. And that's a great thing about the community now is there is so many different types of knives and so many different types of collectors that will purchase them. And it's fantastic. Sometimes the old man is just kind of like, what is that?
Get off my lawn with that crap.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So back to like your design stuff. Do you ever do anything on paper or are you all CAD?
I'm all on paper.
Okay.
To this day. I'll design everything on paper up to a point, and then I'll start transferring. Now it just depends. Like, okay, if I'm just going to make one or two and I'm not going to cut them out on the mill on my CNC, then I never do a CAD drawing of it.
Yeah.
I'll just do it manually and I'll just draw it on there, on the bar, die chem and scribe it on there just like everybody else. Now, if I plan on making more than one, or if it has a level of complexity that requires it to be done with a CNC, then I'll go from my pencil drawing to an actual CAD drawing.
Yeah.
And then refine it on there. But all the hard, all the flow, all the proportions, all that's done with a pencil because that's how I grew up doing it. And that's how I express myself creatively is with a pencil much more than I can on the screen. Because part of it is you can't really tell the size of it on the screen. You can't get the feel of it. Like when you're drawing it with pencil, you can cut it out and hold it in your hand,
Yeah.
and go, oh, that feels pretty good. Or no, that's goofy. That looks cool, but that hits me right in the middle of this knuckle, and then you can adjust it like that. And then once it's all worked out like that, and then I will start working on the CAD if I'm going to make, more than one of them, or if I'm going to, and I've done really complicated pieces, guys, that had like over 10 programs that I only made one knife. And it was just for the complexity of it,
Well, yeah.
So that's the cool thing that it can do for you,
I'm the exact same way with the paper. I cannot just draw an empty space without perspective, without some sort of, that relationship of the knife, because that's what we use it, and drawing it with our hand to me makes a lot more sense. And then I try to replicate it as much as I can into the CAD, which I think CAD is so very powerful, whether you're, using a CNC or not. Mm-hmm. I think it's something everyone should learn. I wish I'd learned it so much faster. But I have to draw on paper. It just the only way to make sense for me.
Right.
It's interesting. I think we've heard the full spectrum from guests, right?
Mm-hmm.
We've had guests who say, "Oh my gosh, no, never paper," right? So much of their stuff exists only electronically, and then all the way out to the other end where people aren't ever drawing it even in CAD, right? They're just drawing in a pattern, cut out the pattern, and let it rip.
Yep.
Yeah.
So
And for me, it's part of it's, I guess, an affect of my age. So, when I was a kid, nobody had access to any kind of CAD CAM software or anything. And everybody's just drawing pictures of knives and cutting them out and then drawing them on cardboard and cutting them out. And, that's what you did. And when you learn and you train your brain to be creative through that process, it never really goes away. If I'm staring at a blank screen, it's really hard for me to start getting creative, as opposed to when I'm drawing, I start moving my pencil and I already have something in my head, an idea, and then as soon as I draw it, sometimes it's like, yep, that's what I was thinking. Or it's like, no, that doesn't look anything like I was thinking, or it doesn't look anywhere near as cool as I thought it would. And now that I'm looking at it with my eyes, it's like, no, forget it. Or, sometimes it's like, well, it's maybe 50% there. Let's work on this. Let's work on that. And then I'll get real close with the pencil, but not like draftsman close, but it's a sketch. And then I'll start doing it on the screen. And then all the little tiny details like spacing the holes and doing this and that. I use the software to do all that, but the concept of it is done with a pencil.
Yeah. Yeah. The minutia is so fantastic for CAD.
Yeah.
You can change so much with just a little tiny movement of little bits and pieces of the folder elements, which I found to be so beneficial for my making.
Yeah, designing a folder is unbelievable, because when you can fold the blade on the software, we used to cut those out of Kydex and drill a hole, and then you would fold it, and look on a manual piece of something that you're holding. Plexiglass, we use that, and it's like, now the pivot hole, I got to make a new blade, and I'm going to drill the pivot hole 20 thou more that direction, and then try it again. And you can just do it all on the screen now before you even cut a single piece of material. That's pretty nice.
2 pieces of sketch paper and a lot of eraser marks. Didn't always work out so well.
Yeah, and a compass so you can swing an arc and see where something's going to land. And that's the way we did it, or the way I did it years ago.
Yep, circle template, French curve, all that stuff.
Right.
Oh, it's fancy.
Yeah. So now it's so much easier with a CAD software to do that, especially when you're designing and there's moving parts involved, and you can move them and see where they're going to be and where they're going to interfere or interruption fits and just all kinds of things. And it's really cool to be able to see what it looks like in the open position and the closed position.
So this is like a Ford versus Chevy thing, right? Or whatever. It's a loaded question about what kind of software would you recommend for a new maker who's saying, I really need to do this. I'm going to go learn CAD. There's a bunch of different tools that people use, right? Whether Fusion 360 or Mastercam or Rhino, right? We have all kinds of people we've talked to that use all various different tools. But what do you think?
Well, what I think is, when a guy's just starting out, he's going to have to learn CAD. So and you guys probably know this, but I'm just going to say this for the benefit of the listeners. So there's CAD and CAM. CAD is computer aided design. And then if you've got a CNC and you're going to actually machine something, you need CAM software, and that's computer aided machining. So what you can do with the CAM software is you can take your drawing, and now you can associate tool paths to all these entities on the screen. Right. But if you don't have a CNC, and you're just worried about the design itself, something you can print out and cut out and, glue to a piece of steel, whatever, then just CAD software will work. AutoCAD works great.
Right.
But somebody that's going to be doing machining, you're going to want to get a CAD CAM software, something you can draw in, then something that you can either draw in the CAM software or something you can import over to your software, your CAM software, so you can start associating tool paths. And what I was going to say a few minutes ago when we kept bumping into each other there was, once you have the design and then you have to kind of explode the thing and look at each part, and then you have to figure out how to machine each part.
Right.
And then, and each one of those parts has its own file, it has its own program, it has its own fixtures and tooling and blah, blah. There's a lot more to it than people realize. They think it's just a magic knife making machine. A lot of people, especially the older guys, but, the guys that are actually doing this day in and day out, it's really complex, more than people realize anyway, to get let's say a folding knife with all the parts. You got a front and back scale, front and back liner, a backspacer, a front and back inlay, a blade. Those are all different parts that have to be machined, in real time, and you have to have a fixture for that and tooling for that and a program for that. And it's just, there's more to it than people realize, but, you get a system down over time also. It's like I've designed and done so many of them. It's like, okay, I got a pretty good system on how I do it. So I've sped it up. When I first started doing that, it took forever. I didn't know how to program at all. And so I was friends with Phil Bogazuski, and he was already programming and drawing, and we he found these instructional DVDs by this guy named Mike Matera, and they were kind of expensive. And he goes, "You want to go halvesies on them?" He goes, "I'll go halvesies." And I was like, "Sure." And so he downloaded the CDs, or they were CDs, I guess, on your computer, and then he gave me the physical copies, and it was my software that I was using, and it was like a class, and you go through and you do it, and then I just go back. So I taught myself how to do it, and boy, that took a long time. Before that, I was relying on friends that were machinists, that were programmers and stuff, and the problem was, it was just, they had wife and kids, and here I am trying to run a business, trying to do a buddy deal on the side to get a program that would work, and it didn't work. That process didn't work, so I ended up saying, you know what, I've got to learn to do this, because I was a manual machinist, and then even when I worked on the CNC, in a machine shop, there's always a programmer. He's the guy that actually makes the program. So you'll almost never see in a machine shop, the guy running the machine, making the parts, is the guy that programmed the machine.
Right.
So it almost never happens. So, and it's actually a rare bird, the guy that's the programmer that actually knows how to machine also. So, and he just, and it's kind of neat because and I've seen it happen, is that programmer slowly begins to learn about speeds and feeds from the machinist down on the floor. He's like, "Did you program this?" He's like, "Yeah." He goes, you realize you can't push this little tiny drill 30 inches a minute, right? It'll snap it off on the first peck. And it's like, well, that's what the book said. He goes, you're just like, I'm sorry, but the book's wrong. It's like, what, this setup, this how long the drill is, blah, blah. This has to go 1.5 thou, blah, blah. And then you explain it to the guy, and he's like, okay. And you even show him, you'll run it. Okay, look, and blah, blah, blah. And he's like, okay. And he's got his notebook. And so the next time a job comes up with a similar setup, he's already got it figured out, and he's got the correct speed and feed set up for reality.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I learned so much working in machine shops. I tell knife makers sometimes, if you can find a way to go get a part-time job at a machine shop, and someone that's willing to teach you, while they're going, you're going to learn so much. It's going to help your knife making indescribably, But, I don't know how practical that is.
Like, that's what sent Sean back to school.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
On his journey to become an instructor. We just like rubbing that in.
I'm an educator. I actually use my teacher's discount over the weekend.
There you go. There you go.
So, if you don't mind me asking, what do you draw in?
I use a really ancient form of Mastercam.
Ooh, boy. So just all the 2D lines and then the wireframe fun stuff?
I don't see. Here's the thing. I've never, and I probably will never, I've never used the wireframes or 3D or any of that. I only do in 2D, and I made this decision fairly early on, was I didn't want to 3D machine any of my parts because I still want to have that handmade look to it. So when I make a knife, no matter what it is, if I cut out the profiles on the CNC, I still hand shape all the knives, grinders, files, sandpaper.
Very cool.
That's the way I've always done it since I've had a CNC, which was in 2004 when I bought my mill. And so I don't take it to that level. Now, when we did production, that was a different story. And so I would make a design, I would hand shape it and everything, and then I would hand it over to the programmer, and he would try to approximate what I did by hand in a 3D drawing, and then we'd put toolpaths to that, and then try to machine it the way I did it by hand.
Yeah, I'm using a very similar old Mastercam is what I've been using for quite a bit. And it can turn into a very large jumble of lines and levels once you start getting into some complex stuff. But I found one of the big manuals, and I thought I was, going to try some of that 1.5D or whatever. And I felt like it would have been easier to go to MIT than what I accomplished there.
Right.
It was not fun.
Well, and part of it, you have to look at so when you have a 3D file that has all these tool paths, right, it is tens of thousands of lines of code. In my old machine, it won't accept that much. It doesn't have that much memory. Even with the memory upgrades I've done to it, I have to do what's called a trickle feed. And so you've got a laptop, and then it's feeding. So that machine's so old, it came with a floppy drive. And that's how I used to send my programs over. It was a floppy. And then about 10 years into it, I switched it up to an RS-232 port where I send the program over from an old laptop. And anyway, but if your program's over a certain size, it won't even hold it in that old machine. And so you have to trickle feed it over, and it's utilizing the code as it's machining it. But the problem with that is if you can't stop. You push slide, hold, and pause, you have to restart it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it's not even worth it. And so it's like, you know what? I'll just shape this by hand.
Yeah.
I'll just grind it, file it, polish it like I did, in the 90s and 80s, and that's the way I'll do it.
I've recently moved over to some Fusion 360, which, drawing-wise, it's a fantastic program. There's a lot of great modeling you can do. The flip side is the cam can be a bit weird, especially for old people like me that's been using like the old Mastercam. But yeah, my machine was not a fan of the size of the file that I stuck in there.
Yeah. And then I learned the hard way that Fadal, so my machine's a Fadal, it requires 15% of the memory to operate the machine for its own operating processes. And so I loaded it up one time with a huge program that my friend had programmed doing 3D. It was on these Ballysong handles, so there was like 8 handles, and it was just filled it up, and the machine just started moving in all these weird directions and this and that, and I turned it off, and I called the tech, and he's like, what? He goes, all right, go to MDI, manual data input. He goes, put in ME, which is memory. And he says, and it'll tell you how much percentage is free. And I said, it says 3%. He goes, that's your problem. He goes, that program's too big. He goes, you broke into the operating memory. Oh. And I was like, okay. He goes, delete that out of there. He goes, you have to leave at least 15% memory free so it can operate off of that somehow. I'm not sure how that works, but ever since that incident, I've always made sure. And then I'll even go in and delete extra programs that are in the machine that aren't being used, just to free up more memory space. And I think that kind of goes for a lot of other machines too. They don't really talk about that. And according to this tech, he was telling me that. He said, you want as much free operating memory as possible, and your machine will glitch out less.
That's interesting.
It is.
Older machine challenges, right?
It is. But it's worth it. It's kind of cool when you're making something that it's so gratifying when you've done, you've had this design in your head for years, and then all of a sudden you see it on a piece of paper in front of you with a pencil. You're like, yep, that's what I was thinking of. You go through the whole designing process in the CAD CAM, and then here you've made the program, the fixture, the tooling, everything. You've touched off all the tools, and you cut the first one, and there it becomes reality right in front of your eyes. The machine's cutting out your dream.
Right.
It's such a satisfying process to do that, and that's one of my favorite things to do in knife making is to watch the very first time something is like born to the world that's previously just been in your head, and to see that happen, it's so gratifying for me.
Yeah.
It really is. Then after that, making more and more of them isn't as gratifying. The one of these tool makers I used to work with, he was really good at like solving problems and building fixtures and tools. And he saw that as like, that was his job, was to figure out how are we going to hold this? How are we going to cut it? How are we going to locate it, clamp it down, make good parts? And, but I remember him telling me, he goes, oh, it's all fun making all the toolings. And then the first part, he goes, after that, it's work.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. He goes, but I don't even consider it work until that is just a challenge and it's really fun, like solving a puzzle. And he goes, but then you look over to your left and there's a palette full of blanks. He goes, that's when the work starts.
Right.
Yeah. And it's kind of like that with knives too, right? Because it's the challenge of designing a new thing and then getting to see it for the first time. And, and then you go through like this phase, well, I do, where I'm like, I want to try all these different material combinations, and then you eventually exhaust that. And then you've got people that are like, I want one like this or that or that. And then it's still fun to make the knife, but it isn't that fun, as that kind of fun where you're doing it for the first time.
Yeah.
Yeah. That describes me pretty well. I get very excited about solving the puzzle. Then when the puzzle is gone, you're like, all right, let's see what other puzzles are out there.
Right. I think that might just be, human nature for a lot of people. But then again, I've known other people like Bob Lum, I know we'd had this very conversation one time, and I was like, Bob, I said, you're still making knives you made back in the 80s. I said, aren't you tired of these designs? I said, they're cool designs, but aren't you tired of making them? He's like, well, he goes, I knew I was going to run into that. So I figured out a way to make it okay. And he goes, and basically what he told me was he'd made it like a challenge to make this one particular one he's working on as best as he possibly could. Every little aspect of it as flawless as possible. And then, knowing that he was going to make another one in a week or, maybe in a day, but then he was, he just looked at that part of the challenge as trying to better what he had done before. He goes, and that's the only way I could really approach it without, going crazy, going, I'm tired of looking at these Tantos or whatever,
Right.
And so he figured out a way to do that. And he really, really loved his designs. When he was done with it, when he designed something, he looked at it, I could see this little smirk on his face, and he was like, yep, that's it. And which to him, that meant I'm going to make these the rest of my life.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of how I feel about it. I mean, I make a lot of the same knives, but it's a design that I came up with and I like it, and I don't mind making 20 of the same thing in a week.
Right.
It's, I don't know how many TK1s or alphas I've made now. Hundreds.
Yeah. Right.
Bazillion.
Yeah.
Yeah. TK1s has got to be a big number.
Well, I've been making that knife longer than my oldest son, Zach, or youngest son, Zach, has been alive.
Yeah. That's wild to think about, isn't it?
Yeah. It's like 20 some years,
And you still like making it, Tom.
I'm making 3 today,
I'll have 3 more done before the show is over, he said.
So, yeah.
I remember Tom Mayo telling me about the TNT folders that he used to do. He said he made so many of them that his brain doesn't even have to show up for work. He goes, I just got to put my body in front of the machines and it shakes over.
Right. There's something to be said for that.
Right.
I've got a question for you, Todd.
Sure.
What aspect of making knives on the CNC do you find that are easier to do and which are harder? What are the pros and cons kind of?
Well, repeatability, you can make them all, the profiles are all real close. Inlays, if you learn how to do inlays, there's still a lot of handwork with the inlays, but the intricacy of the inlays is fantastic. it's just like we're talking about being creative before. There's so many ways you can be creative with the CNC, more than you even realize. You know, I know guys that grind their bevels on a CNC mill with a cup wheel. All their flat grinds are done on the mill, you know. So, you know, that machine wasn't designed with that. When they were making it, they probably never thought that somebody would be grinding knife blades with that machine. But there are certain things that the machine, it's just not, I don't want to say it, it's not suited for one-off stuff very well, because of all the work it takes to get those parts into reality for the first time.
Right.
All the stuff we were talking about for the last hour, you know, the programming, this and that. So unless you're going to do something like I've done in the past, where you're just making a really crazy, like I'd made this smatch it one time with all these piercings and all this, and I turned it in for one of my guild inspection pieces. Well, I did just tons of programming, tons of runtime, all this to cut all those little piercings and all that, and I only made one.
Right.
You know, I still have the programs, so if I ever decided to make another one, you know, I could. But yeah, I really did all of those, well over 100 hours of work for one knife. So,
as an aside, that's one of my favorite knives of all time.
Which one's that?
The Smatch It from your, what was it? One of your presentation knives for full membership, or was that for your just getting into the guild?
Actually, I can't remember which one. I think that was for membership, for voting status. But well,
dude,
thank you. I appreciate that. But yeah, that was
fucking amazing. I mean, really. And that was Stellite core too, wasn't it?
Stellite core. And so
Yeah.
everyone, if you look at that knife again, you look at every one of those little piercings in the blade. I snapped off at least 1/8 inch end mill in every one of those piercings. Right about the time it hit that Stellite.
Damn.
Oh, I bet so. It didn't like
Yeah, that
changes.
makes sense. I mean,
Yep. It was a nightmare, man. Oh, gosh, that was a nightmare. Maybe that's why I haven't made another one. But I'll do, if I was going to do another one, it probably wouldn't be that Stellite core stuff like that. But yeah. Anyway, that's an example of the type of thing you could do with the CNC. But, you know, there's still plenty of knives I make where I don't. The matter of fact, there's one I'm working on right now, a big Persian fighter I call the Xerxes. You know, I've not cut one out on the CNC yet. I've made 3 or 4 of them. I've got pattern. I just cut it out on the bandsaw, die chem, you know, layout, you know, just like that. So a lot of people just assume all of my knives are made on the CNC, and they're not.
Right.
You know, it just depends. Most of my folder parts, the folders, I would say for a guy that's really into folders, you're going to get way more benefit out of a CNC making folder parts than you are just fixed blades. Now, if you've got a ton of demand for even a simple fixed blade, it might help you, especially with the handle components. You know, if you're not water jetting or lasering the profiles,
Right.
because it's not real fast. Cutting out a fixed blade profile, you got to do it in steps, and then you got a rougher, then a finisher, and those end mills aren't cheap. You know, you can cut out a lot more blades with a bandsaw than you can with end mills. You know, for the buck, for the cut buck.
Right.
How many cuts how many things are gonna get cut out. So now, if you've got a profile that's exceedingly complicated, or you know, then yeah, machining it makes more sense. But if it's just a pretty standard fixed blade, you know, most of it's going to be much, much faster to do it all manually on the bandsaw and grinder and the old school way.
Yeah. Sometimes I'll just decide to make some random fixed blades or whatever, and I just step up to the grinder, the bandsaw, cut it out, and just shape it till it looks like a knife I want to make. And I'm just like, why do I even mess around with the damn CNC? It just, there wasn't hours of, you know, doing all this shit and fixturing, and there's so much time involved in that.
Well, with me, with those flutes, you know, those fullers that I put in there, if that fuller's curved, not just a straight line, then yeah, it really comes in handy because I can do it on the mill. But a lot of, like, all the years I made those knives with the fullers before I had the CNC, I do the fullers on the Bridgeport.
Yeah.
You know, and I still do it that way. If I've got just a manual I'm going to just do it all old school and I'm doing a fixed blade or even a folder that has a straight flute, I'll just set it up on the Bridgeport and do it, because it's a lot easier than, making a whole program and the tooling and all that.
Oh, yeah. But the fun you can have with the little inlays and the curves and all that shit.
Yeah, for sure.
That's what makes it all worth it to me.
Yeah.
Tom's over there like, why didn't Todd tell me this about fixed blades and CNC? But I think, Tom, you said you got a different approach to things a little bit, right?
Yeah, we basically kept our mill running, making fixed blades, and for the first 4 years, basically, and that's how we paid for it. I mean, I could keep the mill fed and do all the other stuff in the shop while it's machining, and by the end of the day, I got a stack of 20 blades that are cut out, and I've basically done everything else too.
Nice.
Yeah. Well, and it seems like for you, one, there's volume, right? You're doing a bunch of knives.
That's a big part of it.
And two, it doesn't, you're not constrained by batch sizes for jet or laser or whatever, right?
Right.
If you need a bunch today, a bunch of blanks today or tomorrow or whatever for some reason, or you just want to, you can just go make them, and maybe in the end it's not ultimately the shortest dollar way to do it, but I seem to recall you have a pretty solid stack of blanks in the shop.
Yeah, we got a few.
Like a few thousand probably.
Yeah. I was heat treating today and I ran out of foil, and I had to stop at like, I think I got 30 some blades heat treated,
But to be fair, you had stacks before you had a CNC too.
Yes.
that's true.
I thought Tom was going to say, I ran out of heat treat foil, so I set up the CNC and I milled myself some foil.
No,
I ran out of heat.
I thought,
I set up the roller.
yeah, I thought I had a roll and I didn't, but that stuff has gotten really expensive.
Heat treat foil, yeah.
Everything has.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I agree 100% on the repeatability of holes and the accuracy. Whether you're doing fixed blades or folders, like if you're doing the handles and the fixed blades, they'll just go together. Or if you're doing folder parts, yeah, the repeatability that's the key.
It is. But it only makes sense if you're doing, like the numbers you're doing, Tom. If you're cranking out a bunch, and you can even get ahead of yourself and have some inventory, for your TK1. It's like, well, I might as well cut out 100. I know I'm going to sell them, and
Right.
just have them all hanging there.
Well, yeah, I try to keep heat treated blades in stock of most stuff. I've gotten bad about that over the last year because I've been focusing more on folders, and that's a different game. But I still like when we set up to do fixed blades next, I'll run several $1,000s worth of steel.
Yeah.
Just stack them up.
So the way I did it when I did production, well, I say production, when I had the crew, we were making the semi-custom stuff down there in California, was I'd water jet everything oversize and then no holes in the parts. And so I just had a blank. And the reason I did it was just so I could nest the parts and get more yield out of the material. And then we would use the CNC to cut out, the profile and put all the holes in. But you just make sure you leave enough material, on all sides that the end mill can clean it up and get the kerf off your water jet cut.
That's
because there are water jet cutters that are so bad that that kerf is more than 50 thou, from top to bottom. First time I got a bunch of parts scrapped, I left an extra 50 thou all the way around, thinking, oh, that's plenty. Thinking like a machinist. I was like, I'm just giving him, acres of real estate here to work with. Came in, and they didn't clean up. They still had kerfed on them with 50 thou. I was like, oh my god. So, yeah, so that was really bad. Water jet guy out there in California, but anyway, that type
I want to recommend Top Done Water Jet services. They're freaking awesome. Chris is a good guy, and he cuts
Done, yeah.
great.
Okay, good. Well, I'm not doing those kind of quantities anymore, so I don't do it. But
That's what we're doing. We're water jetting the blanks with hold down tabs now. Just allows you to nest it a lot less waste, and
yes.
tools last a lot longer and all that jazz.
Yep. So that's a good way to do it, and and you're not cutting tons and tons of chips that are, chips are hardly non-existent compared to using a rectangular blank to cut your blade out.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the way to do it. So, and the other thing is, there are guys that have completely bypassed the handmade knife aspect of knife making. They just go straight into CNC, and they have no desire or inclination or even a need to do anything by hand, really the way that we used to do it. And that's fine. If they're making a knife that they want to make and they can do it all with the machines and they're comfortable doing it, I say more power to them.
Yeah. There's nothing wrong. There's no rules to any of this. However you get there is your choice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree.
I think maybe one rule is the whole be honest about how it's happening.
Well, that's
kind of story, right?
You would think that would be a good rule to follow, but
basic human being rule.
We've realized that isn't exactly how that goes sometimes.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, it should be, and I agree. It's like I don't care how you do it as long as you just honest, and then you don't have to like disclose your methods, but just say, yeah, I'm using a CNC for that. That's enough. You don't have to tell me how you're doing it or whatever. But we had to go through a lot of those growing pains with the guild because it was no CNCs and some guys were using lasers and water jet and they were ostracized and it's just turned into a big mess. And now you can use CNC. It's in the bylaw. You can do it.
There you go.
And it came down to it said you must at a minimum be able to hand grind a blade. So you still have to be able to grind a blade though.
Right.
You can't just be machining bevels and turning them in as custom knives. It just can't, in that organization.
Yeah.
So Tom talked a little bit about the CNC stuff, what's harder or easier. One of the questions that we always ask guests that are knife makers is about favorite and least favorite aspects of the craft, right? Like, and it's always interesting. Everybody's answer is different, right? I mean, maybe clips are universally hated. Although somebody said they liked doing clips, right? Because it meant they were almost done, like they were close.
The pocket clip, yeah.
Yeah, the pocket clip.
Yeah.
But clips seem to be a universal thing that people dislike. But some people on the show even will like literally refuse to do a hand rub. Tom, excuse me.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Other people, it's like a peaceful thing, right? To work on that piece of it. So what about you? Where's your Zen moment kind of stuff in knife making and what's the stuff that makes you want to pull your hair out?
Actually, what one of the most difficult things for me is, and I know this sounds stupid, but it's actually picking the materials. So when I'm working on, a one-off knife or whatever, and I go over to my toolboxes with all my handle materials, I can spend half a day there looking at this block, looking at that block, looking at this set of scales, looking at that set of scales, checking it on there. Does it fit? Yeah. Then I'll narrow it down to 5. And then I say in a way, it's like the worst part and the best part because it's really hard to decide, what I want to do with that. Now it's different if the guy's, if the customer says, well, I want ironwood, okay, fair enough, easy.
Right.
But when I'm making something special for a show, that's a really hard part. Mm-hmm. Is that there are parts, grinding is always I don't want to say it's hard, but it very much is pass or fail when you're grinding.
Yeah.
And you get down to your final, it's like, well, you don't screw this up. And I used to make a lot of integrals. And so I might have 30, 40 hours into that knife before I even grind it. And so, this high stress level would come up when I would step up to the grinder. I'm like, all right, I'd literally stop, say a little prayer. It's like, hey, don't let me mess this up, good Lord, because I need this, and and it would focus and it would force me to calm down, and it actually forced me to become a better grinder doing that, because it's like, if you got a little thin little 1/8-inch blank that you got a whole box full of them, you step up to the grinder, you're like, oh, mess that one up, throw it away. Well, you do that with an integral you just spent 40 hours machining. It's not quite the same feeling. Right. So, you learn how to really slow down and calm. And when I was younger, it's like, I would stop grinding. When I was having a bad day at the grinder, I would just stop. And I was like, okay, I'm not doing this today. I'll grind tomorrow or whatever. But the older I got and the more I did it, then I learned how to like work through that. Even when when it's not just coming to me super easy, I can still make it happen. It's not as easy. I have to concentrate more. But there are some days where you step up to the grinder, for me anyway, where it's like, you can do no wrong. It's like, it's just happening, and it's just, everything's coming out even, everything's coming out a good finish. And it's like, and other days it feels like you're trying to hold the blade with your elbows, and it's just, it's horrible. So to me, there's always, when I step up to the grinder, it's always like, okay, it's just going to be a hard day. It's just going to be a good day.
It's usually when you're trying to force it that it's a hard day.
Yeah.
You gotta go with it. You gotta, you know what I'm saying? It's like, if you try to make it do stuff, it doesn't always work like you want.
Right.
Yeah. I still have days I have to walk away. And I hate to say it, but a little bit of that is, I think, my old age now. There's some days where I'm like, my eyes are kind of, I don't know, not feeling it today. You're down there and you're kind of like,
So, do you wear glasses or contacts?
Every day.
So, I never wore glasses, and about, I don't know, 8 years ago, 10 years ago, started not being able to see far away. Then I couldn't see up close, and I realized I was grinding by feel almost. I couldn't see what I was grinding. So
wow.
I ended up having to get progressives. I went straight from nothing to progressives. And then I've got another set of glasses that are just set up to the distance from my grinder.
Really?
Yeah. Because I can't, it's a very distinct distance, and it's like, I've got to be able to see that edge as it relates to the wheel.
It will fuck with your eyes too if you're doing enough.
Yeah.
I grind with an optivisor. I do everything with an optivisor, it seems like.
Yeah.
Probably need to.
Well,
but even when I didn't wear glasses, when I was younger, I still wore an optivisor when I was doing that kind of close-up work. So everyone's got their way of doing it. Yeah, I wear one when I'm grinding.
Because the focal distance on at least the one I have is so close, I end up sticking my face in the wheel.
Well, they got like 5 different focal distance lenses that you can get for optivisor. And then it'll say like 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then it has to do with, and it's not a direct correlation with the distance, but it's like number 5, I think, is a 16-inch or 14-inch.
Wow.
And then there's like an 8-inch, there's a 5-inch, you know what I mean? So it just depends on the type of work you're doing. And then, the further away, the less magnification you get too. But I've got, it's good enough for me where I've got my hands down in a natural grinding position, and I can see it with the optivisor, and it's magnified a couple of times where it works.
Yeah. I've got LED lights on my grinders now, the sewing machine magnetic base lights and all that.
Yep, me too.
Really helps.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's the other thing. Is like the older you get, the more light you need.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
I've noticed that.
Yeah. Yeah, that goes hand in hand, right? It's like, that's why you see people in a restaurant trying to read a menu with their phone flashlight thing going.
Right. Right. Yeah, that's crazy.
Is that
It's
you,
funny
Mark?
how your eyes just don't want to do what they did when you were in your 20s.
No, I don't use the light, but I definitely carry a set of readers. I got a super thin set of cheaters I keep in my pocket. That's a fact.
Yeah.
Well, do an experiment is next time you're looking at something and you can't really, you're right on the verge of not being able to see it, and you think you're going to pull your glasses out, take it out into the sunlight.
Yeah, exactly.
And then look at it and see if you can read it.
Yep. That's where
an experiment.
The lights make a difference for sure. Yeah.
It does. Yeah. So, but then you get to a point where you need both. You need the light and the magnification.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the dilemma, right? Do I pull this Surefire out of my pocket, or do I just put these cheaters on? So I just put them on.
With the base melting 25 lumens.
That's right. Yeah, in my incandescent Surefire.
Yeah.
That gets 1,000 degrees in 4 minutes because it's cranking away. So we've talked about a bunch of stuff. Sean, you got a question you want to ask?
Yeah, man, you seem to have come almost full circle from, straight up hands-on custom to production and now back around to full-on hands-on custom. How did that come about? Was it just all organic? What was the impetus behind each stage?
Well, okay. So, as I was coming up in the industry and making my way and, developing a customer base and developing my own style, it's just me. One guy in a shop doing all that. And, and it just kind of organically comes together. Some of it's planned, some of it's not, but it just kind of happens. Right. And then, I had some partners come along that once I'd had a name for myself and, they wanted to kind of get in on that. And so that's when I moved to California and I decided to train a crew to make these mid-techs, and we try to make, a version of what I'm doing by hand. And we talked a lot about that, I think, in the last episode about how I try to kind of select a guy for different parts of it. Yeah. And we, so then we made semi-customs, we call them mid-techs because that's really, there's no other word for it. When you got a crew of 16 making these knives, are they really custom knives? I mean, they were essentially custom knives, but, they were mid-techs and, or semi-customs. And then at one point, after a couple of years of that, then I also made a production line, which was import stuff, David Dang and all that. And so there were like 3 levels. So there were 3 different logos. So you had the production, the Steelcraft, and then you had the semi-custom with a different logo, and then you had the Todd Begg USA, my full custom logo. That means I'm the only one that worked on that knife, and I built that knife, not a crew, not a company somewhere else, but me.
Right.
Right. And so that's the way that worked. And then the way we'd introduce new product is I would make a custom new knife, new design, and then I would cut it, make it just like my custom knife. And then we would make a production version of it or, a semi-custom version. And that's where I'd hand off the parts to the programmer and have him try to approximate what I did. And we worked really close hand in hand on the design, elements. And a lot of times there's a lot of work to do there, when you're going from a organically hand-shaped part to try to get a machine to do that. It's tricky. It's tricky even with the best of people, it just is. And so, then that was going along okay. And then all the problems started happening with my partners, and I ended up leaving and going back to, or going to Texas, moving to Texas. Well, the problem was they still had all my machinery. And so I didn't have my CNC mill. I didn't have my lathe. I didn't have any of it. And so I'm, shop surfing, like couch surfing, making knives wherever I can. And I end up, in Jerry Moen's shop, and I'm using his knives, or his shop, to make knives, whatever I could, and some of my designs, and didn't have any of my fixtures or tooling or any of that stuff anymore. I wound up with all that being returned to me, a couple of years later after a long fight.
Yeah.
In court. But, but in that process, I was just making, it was like the old days, how I was making knives, just trying to make them to sell. And, I was living in a hotel, and, my wife and kids were living in another state, and it was just, I'm just like, well, what can I make today? Make some money, So it was really tricky. And meanwhile, I've got all these customers who are like, hey, where's my knife? Where's my knife? I'm like, crap. It's like, and finally I had to tell them, I'm like, well, I don't have my machines right now. I'm getting them back. And, and then of course, a lot of people are like, I want my money back right now from my deposit. I'm like, that's understandable. And I tried to figure out how to make that happen. And it was a really tough time. And so, and I'm just trying to make knives to survive, and then I finally get my equipment back. Right. And then that's when things kind of changed, and I came up with the Citadel, and I was able to do some of the old folder designs and new folder designs. And to be honest, it's like without the CNC and the software, I actually don't even really have an interest in trying to make a folder all manually anymore.
Yeah.
By hand, because I know how simple I'd have to make it in comparison, and I would feel like I was going backwards, in my design elements and things like that, and it would just be depressing.
Right.
You see what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
So that's kind of how that happened. And so now, I don't have a big crew anymore. I don't have all those people that I'm making production or semi-custom stuff with. But what I finally did do is I came out with my own production line again. That was the War Junkie line. And, some of those are made in the U.S., some are made overseas. And that's been kind of cool. But the problem was the launch came right about the time COVID came. So it didn't quite have the impact we wanted it to. So it was a little annoying there. But, there's plenty of other knives that I'm doing and opportunities. And right now I'm working with a couple of companies where they're just going to make the knife. It's going to be my design. And it's actually easier, I think, in some ways to do that because I spent so much time designing and prototyping and making all these prototypes and back and forth with the production companies. It's really a full-time job, and meanwhile, I'm trying to fill orders and make custom knives while I'm doing that. And it winds up being a lot, so that's a tough thing to do. But it can be done. So but I'm definitely not focusing on getting a big crew to come in and build knives again. Who knows what will happen in the future, but for now, my mindset is, all right, it's just me. It's just going to be my customs. I even got a little logo, a Texas logo that I'm putting on the back of the blade now, so people can tell that, it's just me here in Texas making this by myself.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
I find that's important.
It's been kind of cool actually getting back to that without having to deal with a big crew coming in with problems all day long. What about this? How do I do this? How do and I don't know if you guys ever worked in that kind of environment, but when you're the one that knows and everyone's coming to you, it gets old.
Nope.
It gets really old. And I'm not saying it's like, get away from me, I don't want to talk to you. It's just, it's like, I don't want to explain this again. I'm glad you came to me. Don't get me wrong. I'm glad you didn't scrap it, but I don't want to explain this again, but here we go.
Right.
It's really nice. At least for me, it's much simpler with just me, It
is.
Yeah.
Making the knives. It's just, if something's wrong, I know who to blame, and I know how to fix it. And I don't know. I find it very, much more pleasing for myself. And I think
that's the one thing I miss is having somebody to blame. Ugh. I love that aspect of it.
Yeah. I do think it's easier sometimes to be by yourself, but it's also, when it comes to, like you said, the productions and the CNC, and it's great if you have a long program or something, but when it's not, and you got to be, kind of cognizant of what's going on, with the CNC, it's distracting, and it's hard to pull your brain in different places sometimes.
Yep.
For me, at least.
Yeah. It is. I mean, okay, so if you got your CNC running and you're worried about, because it's hard to just walk away from the CNC because, you know what, sometimes the coolant shuts off all on its own. And if you're not there to watch it, all of a sudden it's heating up and the tool's breaking and you just scrapped a part in a tool and possibly a fixture. It's like, I really don't walk away from my machine anymore. I used to do that all the time, but it seemed like that's when I got bit when I was off in the grinding room doing something. Mm-hmm. And I made a window in my grinding room where I'm standing at my grinder and I could see the working table on my CNC through this window, so I could see if there was a problem.
Yeah. And it's a different mindset too. From I'd have to get one down on the floor because that's a whole different.
That's what I was just going to say. You need a glass floor.
I don't know if anyone downstairs is going to like that. But work for myself.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's so many different aspects to knife making, and then there's so many different aspects to knife making as a business. There's certain things you have to do, as a business that are not fun.
Yeah.
There's just parts of running a business that are just annoying. Nobody wants to do it, but you have to do it. And is that part of knife making? Well, I'm in the knife making business, so I guess it kind of is.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. We like the knife making part. The business part is not always what we're good at. That's been shown over and over again. But I think like the production stuff like you do, I think is extremely important because that's become almost its own little market of that offshore production, knives that there's a group of people that's all they collect is just that. And it's a very large group of people that may not have any clue about a lot of the custom makers that we adore or know about or are part of history. And I think we need to get those out there to bring them into it. I mean, it seems important to me.
Yeah, I think it's important. It's, and a lot of it's price point driven. You want to have something that's attainable for somebody.
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen collectors walking around shows, and I'm sure you guys have seen them too. They got like 20 neck knives on, right? And they're just they're like Mr. T, and then they'll come up to your table and they'll find the one that I made. They're like, look, see, I'm a Todd Begg collector. I got a Todd Begg knife, and it's a little $125 neck knife, but to them, that's how they collect. They got one from everybody that makes one.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So, and that's fine. And that guy's not spending $5,800 on a folder. That's all tricked out. It's just not going to happen ever.
Yeah.
So,
but he's just as important.
That's his little corner of the world, right?
Yeah. But he's just as important to the community as, the guy that does spend all that money because that's just happens to be what he's into.
Yep. And so my mindset has always been that I want to make a knife for him too. And I want to have something for that collector that wants to spend thousands. And then I want to have something for somebody that wants, $400 or $500. And then I want something for somebody that wants to spend just around $100 if I can. And I think that's important. And then the other thing is you get a lot of collectors that will take out a chunk of money, go to the show, they'll buy their one Grail knife, and then they got a couple of $100 left over. And I've talked to them, that's why I know this. And if they were a knife maker, they'd probably go and buy some handle material and this and that, but they're not. So they're walking around with not enough money really to buy another Grail knife. So I want to make that guy something, a little neck knife or a little knuckle or something. It's like, get that last little bit of money out of his pocket before he leaves that room.
Right.
Or give him something where, because I know that the money's still burning a hole in his pocket. He's like, what can I get? What should I get? And then I do know collectors that will go buy handle material and stuff to give to their next knife maker that's going to make a knife for them.
Yeah.
But a lot of guys don't have any interest in that. So, it's like, try to make him a little knife, a little something he can buy, with his last little bit of money in his pocket his wife gave him. So.
Yeah, I think the accessibility thing is really key, right? And certainly I think following various makers and kind of just watching things, there's both versions of that story, right? There's the person that stays in that lane of your affordable product, and then there are definitely people who kind of graduate forward into full custom stuff, right? And I know Michael's talked about that a bunch on the show about, like where else are people going to come from, right? If I can help them come into my custom stuff through, a mid-tech or an in-house, what he calls a me-tech, right? Where it's a batch built knife that he builds, or a Riot collab, right? Like that's okay. Let's, if it gives them an interest and it gets their attention, and then maybe they turn into a custom buyer someday, then that's a win too, right?
Yep. Yeah. And then even if they don't, even if they stay at that level, that's fine too. Let's keep making them stuff to buy.
Right.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah. That's what's so interesting about this business is there's so many parts to it, and there's so many parts to each level that you want to go to. And, there's so many guys that just want to make a work knife. They don't care, it's like they want it to look pretty, but they're not pushing themselves on craftsmanship and new techniques, and they don't want to learn engraving. It's like, this is far enough, and they're happy on that plateau. It's like, I'm gonna build camp here, guys. I like it here.
Yeah.
It's like, fine, dude. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm gonna keep heading up the trail, or Some people didn't even make it as far as that other guy. It just depends on where you're happy. And now I think if a guy's making like, kind of plain Jane stuff, but he's not happy with it, he's like, man, I really wish I could make stuff like that. Then I think it's incumbent upon him to take those steps we're talking about earlier. It's like, start learning the skill, start asking questions, because then you're going to get burned out and frustrated with what you're making. Yeah. Because it never looks like your hero's knives, or you know what I mean? So I think that's important for those guys to move on. But as far as the collectors, every single bit of this, there's somebody along the way there that was going to want one of those pieces, Yeah. The entry level stuff, the Chinese stuff, I'm talking the stuff that's sold by the gallon that you get at the gas station.
Right.
There's people for that too.
Yeah. The bucket of swords people at Blade do just fine.
Yeah.
Exactly. So
we've talked about that before, but we've all bought some version of that as a kid or as a young collector, whatever.
Yeah.
Everybody.
Whatever gets you to the game, we don't give a shit.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, I like to see those gas station knives, because then that's putting the seed in somebody, isn't it?
Yep.
Absolutely. So it's kind of an interesting thing, Todd. You mentioned earlier when we were talking about that, kind of the round trip that you've been on, as far as, going from being a custom maker to having the big shop with a bunch of people and a partnership and all that stuff, and then back to doing full custom stuff. And we've gotten that, maybe a version of that kind of story from some other people that have been on the show with us. And I think a lot of times, people think about, okay, I do this, I do this kind of work, or I'm this kind of craftsperson, and man, wouldn't it be cool if someday this turned into like a much bigger business, right? And then a lot of times people get there and actually have that, right? Or they find a way to make it happen, or they have that opportunity, or they join up with some people that back them and help make it happen, and they find out, oh shit, this is terrible. Mm-hmm. Right? This isn't what I wanted to do, right? It seemed like a really good idea, but I'm not making
what you wish for.
Yeah, now I'm a manager, or you know what I mean? Like you got to actually run a business, and maybe running a business isn't really why you got into it in the first place, right?
Right. Yeah, it is like that. It was like that for me too, and I get asked this sort of question often from people, and when I look back on my whole knife making journey, I think the most fun I had with knife making really was when I was learning, and I was having those aha moments at 2 a.m. out my shop, and I finally figured it out, and I'm like, yes, and then you're improving, and then people are starting to admire your work, and they're starting to order it, and that part of the journey, not the very first part where you know absolutely nothing, but as you're starting to kind of inch along and figuring out, that to me was the most fun part of this whole thing. And then later on, there's dealers and purveyors, and then there's interviews, and then there's just more. There's a lot of other stuff that isn't quite as fun, or you didn't even know was going to happen. When I was young and I was learning to make knives, I didn't even know about knife purveyors. I didn't know they were out there, and and so at that point in my career, when I started getting more and more recognition, and then guess what? That attracted the dealers. The dealers showed up, and then I had to learn a whole nother aspect of all this. Learning how to deal with dealers, and and that was interesting. And that was like the first, sorry dealers if you're listening to this, but to me that was like the first souring note that I had to deal with in this journey. Yeah, was dealing with dealers and parasitical stuff, and watching a guy buy a knife from you and turn around and sell it at your table, and then he turn around and sell it to one other guy at your table,
right?
And you sold it for $850, and then the third guy paid $4,000 for it. Seeing stuff like that, and you're like, it just it takes some of that joy that you felt out of it, because now it's like, okay, this is a business, and this is a whole different world, and it's got a seedy underbelly, and there's you didn't think about that when you were younger. You just thought about the knives, right? It was just. You just thought about that. You didn't know that whole other part of it existed, and then you learn to navigate it and you learn to deal with it and all that. You don't let it eat you up, but you also learn to stay away from certain people and certain situations. You're like, nope,
Right.
not doing that again.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's more stuff to learn, you know.
There's definitely some weird shit that comes with a little bit of success in knife making that was definitely strange to deal with. And part of it's like, at first you're like, I'm just happy to sell. Then you're like, well, this got kind of weird real fast.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you know, happy to be here.
Yeah. There is weird stuff that happens. You know, and it's funny because I remember Bob Lum and I were talking about, because I remember I was talking about a famous knife maker. I kept saying famous knife maker. And he goes, Todd, there are no knife makers that are famous. He goes, what it's called is notoriety. He goes, you can be the most quote unquote famous knife maker in the world at Blade Show, walk across the street to the mall and nobody knows you. He goes, that's not fame. That's not famous.
Right.
And I was like, you're right. You're right. He goes, this is called notoriety. He goes, and he goes, you're going to get more and more of it, and don't let it go to your head because, like I said, the people across the street have no idea who you are. He goes, it's just a small little group of people that, you know, that appreciate your work and just remember to think that way. And so, all right, that was a good lesson that he taught me about that because he had a lot of notoriety, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Bob Churchill is just that guy that comes and buys duck food. Right.
Right.
He's not the world famous knife maker, Bob Churchill at the
nobody
meat store.
knows who he is outside of the knife world. Yeah.
Exactly. Yep. Yeah. It's interesting stuff. What, so you talked about the production project stuff being a big time suck basically for you. But in that case, I mean, I've certainly, for all my friends that I've talked to about doing those kind of projects, it's a big process, even just for a single model. But in your case, you were kind of simultaneously developing a whole line of stuff, right?
Right.
And that had to be kind of crazy having those projects all stacked up together. And that line's extensive, right? The War Junkie thing?
Yeah. Yeah. There's 6 or 7 models. So there's only one folder model in there right now, but I started off with fixed blades because I was working with White River, and that's all they were doing at the time, and they were doing such good work, and they were excited to do it. So I had several models I was wanting to do with them, so I whipped out, as many as I could. I'm like, here, do this one, that one, that one, that one, and that one. And there's still 3 or 4 in that line that they haven't done yet because COVID happened. They were in Michigan and they weren't supposed to even go to the shop. And it's turned really weird, really fast. During all that time. But for the average guy, if he's going to go get a production knife made, count on a year. It's going to be a year before you're holding them in your hand, and that goes with the prototyping back and forth. That goes, with all the emails back and forth. That goes with deciding on the quantities and the price and the negotiating and the back and forth with the design, the back and forth with, trying to figure out, where are we at? How are we doing? If you're dealing in China, you're going to learn real quick about Chinese New Year and how absolutely nothing will be done during Chinese New Year. Yep. So you learn to factor all these things in, and then you'll get a pre-production prototype. And then what do you do if it's not right? You're like, okay, you gotta make a video circling everything that's a problem, this and that, and then work it back and forth. And then sometimes it's just right, but other times it's not. And it's not like it's like maliciously bad. It's just, hey, a couple things here before you make all of them. Make sure you do this, this, and this, and then they start working, and then then they show up, and then I go through every single one of them, and there's always a cull rate. There's always a certain amount that don't make the cut. They just
right.
You want them to be perfect, but they're not. But so you got a box of say 500 knives show up, and you go through them, and you're looking at 80 or 90 of them sitting over there that don't make the cut. But if you don't, I don't ever just receive a bunch of knives from my production and then just ship them as is. I always go through them.
Yeah.
Always, because that's my name on there. That's my product line. I don't want any of the ones that I think need work to make it out the door. So
Yep.
a lot of companies can't do that or won't do that, or but I think everybody should. There should be, you should be if your name's on it, you should be the final QC on that knife.
Yeah, the buck stops somewhere.
Yeah,
If it's gonna, right? Whether
It is.
you want it to or not, it's stopping somewhere.
It's stopping somewhere, and it's going to be probably right on the top of your head if you, if you sent the knife out substandard, by just expecting it to be perfect. And there's been times that I've pulled a knife out, looking at it, flipping it, click, 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 everything's good, looks good, center, detent's good, blah, 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 blades not wobbling, good, flip it over, and you develop like an inspection process, right? Flip it over, and the screws are all missing on the backside. Somebody forgot to put the screws in. But the way I design them with these posts and everything, they kind of all pressed together, and so it'll actually work without the screws. But shit, I would tell guys when at the California shop, I'm like, oh, you don't like polishing screws because you think they're not important? I said, let's ship a knife with no screws and see how important it becomes right away.
Right.
And so the screws are really a big deal. So what I've done in the past with production partners or whoever I work with is I've had them send a whole bunch of extra hardware, and then I'd have it in stock. That way, if there was a screw missing, I didn't have to ship the knife all the way across the world for the dude to put a screw in it.
Yeah.
I'm like, send me parts, this, that, clips, and I'd have several boxes of parts. And that way for warranty type stuff, it's like it could be fixed in-house, and worked on, stuff like that. So there's all these little considerations, things that you learn as you're going. It's not so simple to just put something into production. It's like, well, you have to learn who the people are that do the work. You have to learn, kind of culturally how they are, and how to talk to them. And it's like, it's funny, when the first knife I put in production with David Dang from Riyadh, we did the whole thing with Facebook Messenger and Google Translate.
Oh, wow.
We put that knife, the Quaken, into production. It was just me and him. And it was funny because my crew would go home, it'd be nighttime, and he was just starting, and because of the time difference. So it was like 9 o'clock at night for me, and then I think it was like noon for him the next day. And we'd sit there and talk, and it was funny because I would send a picture and on a fixture on how to hold this and how to flip it over and what do you index off of to make this cut. And then he would send a picture, and it would say, it would be arrow, and it would be written in really broken. It's like, how do this? And this big arrow pointing at thing. How this, written all over the page. And then, so I was like, I know exactly the problem he's walking into right now. Then I'd go to my fixture and I would show him, and I'd have an arrow pointing, and then it'd just be a big thumbs up or a smiley face because he got it. It's like, okay, now I get it. But yeah, we did the whole thing, and he didn't speak English. I didn't speak Chinese, and we got the whole thing into production. Just Google, two guys with cell phones on the other side of the planet.
Wild to think about, right?
It is.
Yeah.
We made 5,000 knives like that until we actually met in person and started really bumping up the orders.
Yeah, that's crazy.
He told me something so I don't think I'll ever forget it. His English has gotten better and better, but I remember talking to him early on when we decided to go into more production, and I was like, "This is kind of new, David." He said, "This, a well-respected custom maker making knives in China." I said, "We got to be really careful about the quality because of the reputation." And I was really pushing about the reputation of Chinese knives, And back then it was, there weren't any of these super high-end Chinese knives yet, and I feel like David and I kind of started that process to some degree. Anyway, he listened to me, admonish him about the quality and this and that. And he just kind of nodded, and he said, "Yeah, you're right." He goes, "Chinese knives are junk." He goes, "But to be fair," he goes, "we make junk because that's what you asked for. You wanted cheap." He goes, "We can also make good. You just never asked for good. You always wanted cheap." And I was like, just kind of looked at him, and his translator kind of cleaned that up and helped me to, and yeah, he goes, just because we're Chinese doesn't mean that we automatically make everything junky. He goes, "We can make just as good as stuff as you guys can, but you never wanted that. You wanted knives by the gallon that you could put in your gas stations.
Right.
So that's what we made. He goes, we can make good stuff too. Watch.
Right.
And sure enough. Yeah,
here, here we are. Right.
Yeah.
Here we are, where some of this stuff is better than you see coming out of some shops.
And he actually moved. He came out to California and stayed at my house for 3 weeks, and I trained him on how to do the satin finish, how to do the detent, how to do all this. And he stayed in my my office and slept on the floor in my office.
Yeah,
and it was really cool. And I learned a lot of stuff from him and his translator, and about Chinese culture and then he, obviously he learned a lot about knives, and he'd never seen guns before. I took him out to my gun room, and he was like, "Oh my God!" He got to look at the guns, and that was really cool.
Yeah. I did a big project for a number of years with folks in South Korea and in China, and it was always really like kind of once you figure out how to work with language issues and the huge time zone difference and other stuff, and can actually get into cultural differences and stuff, it was absolutely fascinating. Right. And I certainly came away from that with a much deeper appreciation for, some of their history and, why things are done a certain way and why, business relationships work a certain way. And, it was very educational. I remember some of that stuff very fondly. It was definitely hard, but I learned a lot, and I'm thankful for that.
And it's interesting because they're going through the same thing you are.
Yeah.
Like here's a good example. It was when I was still with my partners, we were at Blade Show, and we had reservations to this really good restaurant, and we wanted, we're big fat white guys. We wanted to eat we're kind of foodies. It's like, oh, we're going to order this. We're going to try that. We're going to try the lamb. We got to, and so the guys from there was a couple of, I can't remember their names, but there was a couple of guys, a couple of ladies, and it's maybe 5 of them. And we all sat down, and, we're just eating this, eating that, drinking this, drinking that. And, they're all like super proper, and they're trying to do all the etiquette. And finally, we were done, and the dessert was going to come out. And so it comes out, and I can't remember what it was, but they put one down in front of each one of them, and they're like, no, full. They're trying to say no. And they're probably trying to figure out how these Americans eat so much.
Right.
But they were trying to politely, refuse any more food. And I looked down at them. They're all looking at me. And I said, no eat, no business. And they all just looked at me and their eyes went wide, and they all picked up their forks at the same time. And I was like, I'm kidding.
Right.
I was joking, guys. Of course you don't have to eat that. I was just joking. But they thought they had made a huge
tactical error.
Actually, I was kind of funny, but it was really, in a way, I felt kind of bad. I was like, no eat, no business. And I could not tell you how fast they picked up their forks. They understood what I said.
Yeah.
Yeah. But they were like, oh, no, we're not losing this deal off of a dessert. Stuff it down.
Right.
It was funny, though. But anyway, they're really nice guys. And
yeah,
we did some deals, and it's interesting. As long as everybody makes money and the customer's happy and everything's at a price point they can live with, and, then it can be a good thing for everybody, especially if you're using American materials. It's like people have a problem with it being made overseas, but, I've always insisted on American materials.
Yeah.
So at least we've got that going for it, so a lot of guys don't, they don't want, so all my fixed blades are made in the U.S. for now, at least. And I think that's a good thing. And it's an interesting prospect. Doing something overseas. Part of it is where do you stand as an individual maker in the marketplace? Can you even make a mid-tech or a production knife that will have enough demand to support it? Is it worth it yet? There's all these considerations.
Right.
Now, speaking of all the overseas production work, what do you think of like the vast amount of like not only production but new makers coming into the market?
For me personally, as a knife maker, I like to see new makers come in, guys that make knives. When I see a guy come in that's never made a knife, but he has a whole line of knives that he just designs them, and there's and he's having them made. It's cool because it helps the whole industry, I guess. But I don't know. I'm more impressed with a young guy or gal that's coming in and actually building knives and trying to make knives. And then later on, if they do a production line, I think that's cool. But if somebody just comes out of the box with just production stuff and they've never even built a knife, I find less in common with them. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I can see that. But it's also like, anymore, they don't have to know. I mean, the companies, they know how to build the knife to make it work. So they kind of just have to send a design and make it happen. And there's been some pretty successful, I guess, what do you want to call them?
Projects.
Production companies. I like to call them like micro production, but it's gotten like a Blade anymore. It's a ton of that. We talked about that on our Blade show preview and discussion. It's just gotten so huge that it's almost like seems like a lot of stuff gets lost out there.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it'd be hard to navigate as a new collector, even what to buy, who to buy from.
Well, and like we said before, guys, there's room for everything. There's room for those guys and everything. But I'm just talking, from me personally, I'm going to have more in common with the knife maker, the guy that actually makes the knives, even if he has a production line, because those are things that we can talk about. And I honestly feel like some of the best designs come from guys that make and use knives too. So, otherwise you're just dealing with images on a screen. It's like, it looks cool. It looks cool. Yeah. And you put it in your hand and it's like, ugh.
Yeah.
This thing feels like I'm carrying a Rubik's Cube around here or something,
Yeah. There's a big difference between visually interesting and really, really functional. Right. And the trick is maybe getting a little bit of both, but.
Right.
Yeah.
And then, and I'm all for artistic stuff too. Cause like I said, I love Kronk. I do crazy stuff, but even like my crazy knives with the knuckles and spikes and all that, you pick it up, the handle feels really good. you know, it isn't some crazy awkward thing. I mean, it is, but the handle isn't, you know what I mean? It's anyway, that's just my perspective on it. And I'm sure other people look at it differently. And I think because of CAD CAM software and the internet and all these, offshore companies, now a guy can just step in and be part of the knife industry. He's never built a knife in his life. And now he's considered a knife maker because he's got knives on his table.
Right. Weird to think about.
So I would never discourage somebody from doing that, but what I would do is encourage them to try to get with knife makers and actually build stuff. Kind of like we're talking about engineers. I think an engineer learns more when he's in a shop and knows what it actually takes in the real world to make things stick together,
For sure. Yeah. It certainly adds a dimension of sense check and functionality, right? One, you got to be able to make it real, and two, it's got to actually work the way you think it's going to work, because it doesn't always work like it works on paper, right?
Right.
So
that's exactly right. Or you'll run into a problem, you're like, oh, that's where the head of that screw is going to wind up. Interesting. Didn't see you showing up there, mister.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, Todd, it was awesome having you on. What shows do you have coming up, and where can people see you in the future?
So I've actually decided here recently to drastically cut down my show attendance. I'm going to do Blade and then Blade Show Texas. And I may do the USN show, but, I was doing the Art Knife Invitational, the Tactical Knife Invitational. I was doing that one in Nashville, trying to squeeze in New York. And it's like, and so the problem with all that was I was only working on knives for shows, and collectors that are waiting, that backlog's getting longer and longer. People are getting frustrated. So it's like, you know what? I'm just going to cut out the shows. And then the reason I'm picking those two shows is because of the Knife Makers Guild. I've got obligations. We've got meetings and things like that.
Yeah. Yep.
And so I'm going to be at those shows for sure, and fulfill my obligations. And then the rest of the time, I'm just going to work on, my backlog.
Well, I mean,
so
the Fort Worth show is right in your backyard too.
It is. It's like 45 miles from my house.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's pretty nice.
So yeah, that's a no-brainer being to that one. And then Atlanta, of course. And we drive to that one too. It's like a 10 and a half hour drive for us. But Yeah, that's what I'm going to do. And there's so many other shows out there. There's just so many of them, and some of them are kind of hit and miss as far as, it's not cheap doing a show, as you guys know. You've got thousands invested in this thing, and they open the door and hardly anybody walks in. You're like, uh-oh.
Right.
Now what?
Yeah.
It's like, so I don't know. The internet changed things a lot. And it was interesting to see how knife shows were before the internet and then after. It used to be really something, before the internet. It still is because, people see what you're building and they want to come see it in real life. But it's pre-internet days. It was just completely different. It was like a feeding frenzy. It was, I don't know, like the New York show back then was crazy, absolutely crazy. But anyway, it's fast forward back to reality here. It's I'm gonna cut out as many shows as I can for the next couple of years, just to work on my backlog. Get some knives finished, and focus less on these shows, and then we'll see where it goes from there. And part of it, the economy's down right now, and the shows aren't quite what they used to be. I know a lot of knife makers that used to sell really well, and then they're bringing knives home. They're like, "What happened? This isn't normal."
Yeah.
And so, I think our economy's horrible right now, and I think hopefully it can improve. We'll see how that goes. It's to me it seems like the price of gas is like it governs everything. If gasoline's super expensive, pretty soon everything in the world's going to be expensive, and then you're spending all your money on gas and food and all the stuff that, a lot of guys don't have a lot of disposable income right now.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting times, right? Like you said, there's this whole economic aspect, right, and what's going on in the world. There's also kind of the ebb and flow of what's happened with the industry, right? We were in such a crazy tidal wave of, where people were paying tons of money for knives, right? Especially in the secondary market. And that drove open bid numbers to be really high and other stuff, right? And then that all kind of contracted, and, that hurt some folks. And that's kind of interesting to see. But then, throw with that what seems like, Michael talks about this a lot, right? You just open Instagram, right? And just search knives, right? And it's absolutely dizzying how many, some combination of air quotes makers, like you talked about, Todd, right? People that are just designing stuff and having somebody make it for them.
Right.
And actual makers, right? And it seems like every day, or certainly every week, you're kind of just scrolling through, looking at stuff online, and okay, here's a maker who, when you go to their profile, yeah, no shit, they're making this stuff, right? In some cases, crazy sole authorship stuff, right? Making their own steel, all the way through the process.
Yep.
And the knives are fantastic, and I've never heard of the guy before.
Yeah.
It's so weird, right? It's like, what the hell?
I know.
Where did these people come from? I don't even know how they...
I thought it was just because I was getting old. I thought I was turning... I'm like, who is that guy? And he's got a huge following, and it's like, I've never even heard of the dude.
Yep.
I have the same thing happen to me, and I don't know if that's because I'm old. I don't know what it is, but
yeah,
it's gotten massive. It's just gotten so huge,
right,
beyond our scope.
Yeah, and the old guy thing's probably a factor. Tim Reeve called us the old guy podcast, so that's fine. We can live with that.
I don't mind being the old guy. You stay alive long enough, and eventually you're going to be the old guy.
That's right. It's just a fact. It's a scientific fact.
That's right.
Yeah, an inevitability. All right. Well, Todd, thanks for taking the time to join us again for another long conversation.
It's been fun. I can sit here and talk knives, and I enjoy it, guys. I really appreciate the opportunity, and it's been my pleasure.
Yeah.
Pleasure's all ours, man.
We really appreciate it.
Always good.
Some of it was mine. Don't try to take all the pleasure.
Okay, I'm a giver. Giver.
Sean's a pleasure hog. That's a fact. He's like that. He takes all the pleasure. All right. Well, we have to say thanks again to our friends on Patreon. Thanks for supporting us, and George at AMX, and our friends at Giant Mouse, and Nick and Billy. Yeah, by the time this one hits the air, they're going to be eyeballs deep in shit show problem solving that knife promoters guys have to deal with, right?
And I will be hopefully finishing knives.
Yeah, hopefully finishing knives. Famous last knife maker words.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's it. Thanks for everybody for listening. We'll talk to you next time.
Thank you.
Thanks all.
Thanks, folks.
Thanks, guys.
To learn more about our makers, you can find Tom Crine on the web at crineknives.net, in his Facebook group, Crine Knives, or in his Instagram account, at Crine Knives. For Michael Birch, check birchtreeblades.com, Facebook group Birch Tree Blade Works, or Michael's Instagram at birchtreeblades. For myself and the Raygun Bead Project, we're on the web at raygundivision.com. We have a Facebook group called Raygun Division, or my personal Instagram, at msteiner. For those interested in photos, references from the show, or some discussion about the show itself, you can find us on the web at markofthemaker.com, in a Facebook group called Mark of the Maker, or on our Instagram, at Mark of the Maker. Last but not least, the ultra cool and haunting background music we use for the show is a piece called Noir Guitar by Stevie's Amp Shack, found at the Free Music Archive and licensed under Creative Commons CC BY 4.0. Thanks for listening.